Hello, good morning. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to another edition of our inService podcast. I'm really excited about today's topic. I am Gerardo Pelayo, the Chief Research Officer here at Service Council. And as I was saying, the topic that we're going to cover today, why the voice of matters in service excellence, is one of the reasons that attracted me to Service Council to begin with. I'm really glad to be joined in this conversation by Harold Heald. He's the Associate Vice President of America's Service Contact Centers at Agilent Technologies. Harold, thank you for being here. We'll get to
Thanks, Gerardo. Thanks for having me.
yeah, we'll get to hear more of you as we go through the conversation. A little bit of a background first on why this matters to myself and where does it fit within our entire conversation. At Service Council, most of our research, our engagement, our audience is positioned at the service leader role. At the Smarter Services Executive Symposium we just held in September in Chicago, we had 80% of attendance being director or VP level or above. So why is it that the voice of the frontline matters so much? I think it ranges somewhere between irresponsible and dangerous. When we launch initiatives, when we make investments, when we roll out programs, technologies, what have you, without listening carefully to the voice of what matters to those that are going to be utilizing, benefiting, hopefully, from all of these implementations. Are we doing the right thing or are we doing the relevant thing? Are we putting our eggs in the basket that is going to make the most impact? And to put a real example behind that, two of the research efforts that we conduct at large scale are the voice of the contact center agent, which is currently live, and the voice of the field service engineer, which we just presented the findings less than a month ago. And within that, time to value, everybody would agree that it's a relevant metric, a desirable outcome to improve. What is less intuitive is the onboarding experience that we're providing for our teams, putting them in a position where time to value can succeed. And at the top, only 55% of those who have been at the organization as field service engineers for less than 3 years, only 55% say that they're satisfied with the onboarding process. First red flag. We start looking under the hood, and it turns out that 57, 58% is the level of satisfaction for those being 44 years or younger, even as we break out those ranges. But when we get into the 45 plus years, that level of satisfaction drops to 42%. And now we get into what's the weight of their previous experience and their expectations into that onboarding process, and how should we shape it? And does it really matter that the onboarding process is satisfactory or not? Turns out that it does. Career opportunities, one of the big targets that we hear from service leaders, 2-to-1 ratio of satisfaction if they also like the onboarding experience. The satisfaction with salary, 2.5-to-1 ratio. The perception of the process clarity of the steps that they need to follow in their day-to-day, 4-to-1 ratio if they were satisfied with the onboarding process. So we get into is there a problem? How do we understand it? What are people saying? And does it matter? What are some of the recommendations that we're hearing? It goes from having more structured processes, which probably not the most counterintuitive of feedback, but we also hear, on one hand, the completeness that needs to happen within that onboarding process. We hear about the pace at which the knowledge is communicated, and that not all of it needs to be provided within the first 2 or 3 weeks into the job. And we hear about the balance between the technical onboarding and the non-technical aspects that are important to become part of the organization. It's the alignment with the philosophy and the culture of the organization, and even the familiarity with the administrative processes like salary and your retirement plans that are part of the technician experience. And it's important to incorporate this. So all of this, just speaking on a single topic of why we connect the agenda and the strategy for service leaders all the way to the voice of the frontline at the Service Council. And I'm really looking forward to listening to one of the leaders who's been paying attention to this, not just by participating in our research, lending his voice, a keynote panelist in our last Smarter Services Executive Symposium, but having had a very interesting career and a long history of listening to the team. So, Harold, once again, thank you so much for being here. And I clearly have gotten to know you and have had the benefit of that. But for our listening audience, and the last thing, shame on me, a bit of housekeeping. We will be recording this session so that you get to share it with your peers after this. And we want you to be a participating audience. So if you have comments, agreements, disagreements, put them into the chat function on LinkedIn, and we'll try to incorporate them as we move through the conversation. Harold, apologies. Welcome again. And can you provide us a little bit of a background about yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Gerardo, and thanks again for having me. The short story is I spent 10 years in the Marine Corps, cutting my teeth on leadership and technical skills. Did a lot there, everything from personnel administration to working on helicopters. As I transitioned out of the military, I was picked up by DACO, which is a company that deals with pathology instrumentation, cancer diagnostic instrumentation. So that's where I got into service delivery. A couple of years later, Agilent purchased DACO, and I've continued the journey there. And so April will be 20 years combined between those. Worked my way up through leadership, ultimately becoming regional manager of the Americas for the diagnostic team. I picked up my bachelor's and my master's along the way, notably doing that while I was carrying a tool bag or a briefcase out in the field visiting customers. And so that led to a lot of long nights and long weekends. I had a chance to move into a global service role as we kicked off a new leg of the service team called the Biomolecular Service Organization. And some of your members will know Biotech, that's been around and a partner for 10 or 12 years on the Service Council. We purchased them and we're integrating them. And so that's how I became involved with the Service Council. And that helped land me the role with your Leadership Advisory Board. Over the last 2 years, there's been a lot of change at Agilent, which we'll get into. And part of that necessitated me finding a new role as things were reintegrated. And so that's how I wound up here in the contact center. And so today I'm leading the Americas Contact Center, which is remote engineers and schedulers, and getting to use both of your surveys.
Perfect. And such a deep experience and so relevant for today's topic. So let me dive right into it. And I talked at length of why, to me, it resonates so much, the voice of in order to help with service excellence. But tell me about your perception. What's the importance within Agilent Technologies for yourself of listening to the voice of within your organization? What are the voices that you capture within that?
Sure. Agilent's got a pretty good history and culture of listening to our employees, right? So we have employees that have been around 40 plus years because they started with HP before Agilent spun off from that. And so the culture has been one of inclusivity, where everybody kind of comes into the tent and then wants to stay here. The way you keep that culture going is by listening to your people and taking action on the things that they're telling you. And I think we've got a great success of that. We've done different survey styles over the year, different engagement surveys and Great Place to Work and other things in order to make sure we're hearing that. And I think the voice of the engineer and the voice of the contact center agent allow us to get to that next level of granularity to make sure that we're not only hearing, but we're hearing specifically what our direct teams need so that we can take action on that.
Yeah. And thank you for that, and we'll get into what that means more specifically. We have some early comments already. This one from my colleague John Carroll, CEO and founder. By the way, he also commented on thanking you for your service to the country, which I stand behind us as well. Thank you for that, Harold.
Thanks. And I just celebrated my 250th birthday. I'm very proud of that. The Marine Corps birthday.
Hey, great, great. So, well, one of the comments that John has here is this: so some of the troubling statistics, some of the red flags that we see in the data, and it's that a third of the field service engineers don't agree or are neutral at best that their company is interested in collecting their data, and then what they do with that information. So this sets a really good background, because what I want to get through today is we started talking about the why, but then really get into the how and the so what behind that listening. It's not just a listening exercise, but how does it connect to an overall process so that you can close the loop on that feedback. Thank you, John, for helping us position that. And let's start with the micro. You've been a very engaged advisory board member, and again, thank you for that as well. And one of those examples is promoting your team's participation in the voice of the field service engineer, the voice of the contact center agent. Can you walk us through a little bit? What is it that you use this findings, the benchmarking that it provides for? What is it that you don't use it for, and maybe resort to other mechanisms?
Sure. So as I mentioned, Agilent's been going through a pretty significant amount of change. And so I mentioned, the biotech acquisition a couple of years ago. Obviously, we've all come in and out of COVID, and we've seen changes in the business scale and scope and things like that. Agilent was very successful during that period because of the products we offer. But in the last 2 years, we've changed CEOs. And so the previous CEO was around for a long time, very well liked individual. And so we've seen a lot of the C-suite change. We've seen divisional changes, and that's led to people wondering what's going on, and a lot of uncertainty. We've seen the changes in the global economic, political arenas around us, and how that has an effect. One of the things you guys continue to talk about at the Service Council is the silver tsunami. And the amount of folks that are heading towards retirement. And I've seen that on my team with a pretty significant number of people retiring in the last year. All of that has a drastic effect on our teams. And so we need to use this survey to kind of keep our finger on the pulse. What are they feeling? What are they seeing? What are they thinking? Some of the great numbers that come out of both the engineer and the contact center survey is, why do they want to be here? Why do they not want to be here? And how long before they look for the exit? For us, because of the complex technologies that we're dealing with, it can take 18 months to get somebody fully trained in carrying a toolbox or carrying a headset. And so if the average response is, hey, in 2 years, they expect to move on from this role, then I've got a problem to begin with, right? And so we've got to find ways to stay engaged with those employees, and convince them to stick around in those roles a little bit longer than 2 years. We've got to get that return on investment, and ultimately take care of our customers.
Yeah. No, I'm glad it's being useful, and thank you for the kind words around that. But as much as I would love to continue talking about our research, let me take a step back and talk about the bigger picture, because you mentioned that Agilent has a long history of listening to your teams, right? So can you walk us through a little bit of that? How has the purpose, the mechanisms that you use for engagement evolved over the years, and what has driven these changes?
Sure. So we had what we called the Agilent Leadership Survey, and so it was a managed internal survey, and we got really good participation. It was something we drove participation on because it was all essentially in-house. There was a lot of really good feedback and comments from employees across the organization, and those comments were read all the way up to the board of directors. We always had action plans that were part of our strategy. There was a concerted effort to not just listen, but to do something with it.
Hmm.
And it was a very good a way for us, again, to keep the finger on the pulse and to drive initiatives, and to improve that performance. And so when you had a team or that wasn't performing as well, there was a lot of focus on that until that performance turned around. And I got to see that firsthand in a couple of different ways. Over the years, we said, hey, we're doing such a great job internally. What if we did some external benchmarking? And so we moved to the Great Place to Work survey. And we won a number of awards and certifications across the world on this. for a lot of the same reasons. We had the engagement, we had the culture, and now we could compare that to our competitors or to other companies in the space. The problem with both surveys a little bit is that they are a little generic, and I would say, a mile wide and an inch deep in some cases. You've got great
Mhm.
feedback, you've got great engagement, but if I wanted to say, well, what about my team or my role? I didn't think it was specific enough. It was very difficult to get down to that level. So as we started interacting with you guys and we get the voice of the engineer and the voice of the contact center agent, now I'm taking the Great Place to Work survey as an example down to the next level. And now I can really take all of that information combined to help drive the strategy for that particular role or that particular team. And I think it's got a significant impact that way.
Yeah. Great. Great. It's and to me that's always a sign of a mature organization. This learning culture and the ability and the drive to question yourself and, hey, what are the new what are the new things that we need to validate, to ask in order to get better.
Absolutely.
So again, kudos on that. And you touched on these two different personas, the field service engineer and the contact center agent. And I've spoken about the interrelationships that take place between the two, even as you go higher up at the strategy, technology, interoperability level between remote support and field service. Has it been useful for you to get, or in what ways has it been valuable to get both perspectives in parallel of the contact center, the field service? Do you use this in your communications?
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks to you guys, honestly, because you launched the Voice of the Contact Center Agent survey just as I was coming into this role. And so, having used the Voice of the Engineer survey for a couple of years, I kind of had an idea of what to expect there. And it allowed me to get some learning from my team pretty quickly as I came into this role. Um, it's important to realize that service is service, right? And service
Hmm.
starts where you first touch with the customer. When the customer calls or emails your company and says, "Hey, I have a problem," it's the contact center that picks that up. And if you have the right troubleshooting, if you have the right skill sets on the phone, if you're doing the right deflection, avoiding the truck rolls, as everybody says, um, that team can have a bigger impact to more customers per day than your engineers are in some cases.
Hmm.
And so, what I've been able to do by pulling these two surveys together is compare the data and kind of get the silos out of the way and go, hey guys, we're on the same team. We have the same issues. We're servicing the same customers. Let's share information. Let's share tools. Let's share strategy a little bit better rather than each of us trying to do our own thing. And I think we're just starting to see the success of that.
Yeah, and one of the consequences of what I hear is its influence on the career paths. For example,
Right.
we're starting to see the number rise to almost 1 in 5, um, both from the field to the front line, and from the field to contact centers, and from contact centers to the field, as possible career paths and reasons why they're leaving their current role, which is not necessarily, it's not a bad sign at all, because that means that the talent, the knowledge stays within the organization, and they're motivated. They see that purpose, they see that alignment with the overall culture of the organization. So bringing that visibility, shining a light on the common elements between the two, and letting one see the value of the other. It's really important when we ask them to collect data that they may not use themselves but are important for the other one, right? Just to.
Absolutely. And I think you bring up a great point here on the career path because when we talk about the silver tsunami, when we talk about the younger generation coming into the job, when we see the results in the survey of how quickly they're looking to potentially change roles, keeping them within the service envelope is a great place to start. And it can be near the end of somebody's career. They're a little tired of traveling. You pull them out of the field and you put them on the phones because they've got that
Mhm.
experience. You don't want to lose that. You don't want that going away. You might start on the phones as you're just getting settled into your career, but then get an itch to do something bigger later. And then, oh, look, now you're starting a family and you want to spend some more time at home. Can we get you back in the contact center? So I think there has to be a path that can go in both directions throughout their career, assuming they don't take on other technical specialties or management and that kind of thing. But there has to be a path, and you have to be able to articulate that. That's something we've heard loud and clear from our teams this year.
Yeah. No, great point. And in terms of creating that path, and we have a comment from Lemi Babu. I apologize if I'm mispronouncing the name. But first off, echoing your sentiment and this importance to drive actions from what you're listening, including these hashtag for employee excellence, and the data supports that. We hear about increasing complexity. Over 80% agreement from technicians this year, saying that the expectations about service, the knowledge requires, have increased over the last 5 years. And yet,
Absolutely.
over that same period, these same technicians, only 42% say that the process clarity has improved. And so, as we think of how do we translate the what we're hearing from the front line into building that process clarity, how is it? Can you maybe share some examples, some of the structure that you have behind the process of going from the collection to the creation of value from the voice of?
Sure. The key is explaining the why. We hear that a lot. You start with why. And so when I put out the invites to the survey for either survey, it's why are we doing this? What does the Service Council do for us? What kind of data did we get out of last year's survey? What kind of decisions or initiatives did we make out of last year's survey? They have to know that their voice is being heard and that we're doing something with that, right? And so I'll come back to that in another question here. And then, when we start to get the results back, you guys do a great readout on not just the benchmarking overall, but then because of the number of responses, the benchmarking for the company. If I sat in that session with you and heard you and did nothing with it, this would end in failure. The key is then taking that information and using it as talking points and using it to help drive strategy, to help work with the C-suite, to help get funding for the initiatives that we want to push out. Understanding why it's important that we do X over Y. And so what the surveys do for us is they give us concrete evidence that supports where we're trying to go. Right? It's another bullet point in that business case.
Yeah, and can you, and thank you for the comment, Remy. Can you, building on that, maybe talk about either a specific application, a specific change that you did because of this, or some of the challenges, lessons learned in the process?
Yeah, so we're doing a couple of things. Again, we've talked about the silver tsunami and the younger generation and what it takes to connect those two and to keep people in the team. And we've talked about career paths as well. And this is something I talked to a number of service leaders at the symposium, in fact. We have to be very clear with the younger generation of what it takes to get to the next level, to go from associate to representative to advanced to expert or level 1, 2, 3, however you're structured. They really want to understand, how do I check the box to do that? And then we have to be able to do that. That's the other piece of it. They want to understand that their efforts are being recognized. And so how can you do that better? We also have to make sure that we're capturing the knowledge of the folks that are looking towards retirement or looking to leave their roles. And things like Gen AI are great in helping us cover some of that gap, but it's not the same as finding a way for your senior engineers and your junior engineers to actually talk and communicate on the same wavelength. So there, a lot of effort has to go there. We also have to hear about the things that are really, giving them a hard time in their day-to-day, or the things they don't like. And so one of the results you shared with us this year on the Voice of the Engineer survey was, hey, the pressure to sell has ramped up in the last year. And so it made us take a very close look at what we were doing to drive, lead generation. Is that something we needed to continue to do? Is there a different way of doing it? Do we need to go back and explain the why, as I talked about? And so we haven't quite hit the result there, but it's absolutely leading to conversations of, are we driving quantity or quality? And so we've got some changes coming because of those results, I think.
Yeah, no, That's insightful, and it's particularly applicable, I would say, in your context. Highly regulated. Sometimes there's processes. I've heard you comment on other occasions that might not feel like the most efficient or the most compelling to do, but they're necessary by
Absolutely.
regulation, right? So communicating, getting the message across of why they're important, it definitely resonates. And I'd like to pick your brain on how do you balance this with innovation, because on one hand we're talking about compliance. On the other hand, when we ask technicians about their role in the betterment of the processes in innovation, only 45%, less than half, say that they have time to think about process improvements. And only 2 in 5, even lower, say they have adequate resources to innovate. So surveys are great, and I think they can definitely be the tip of the spear. The examples of how you're utilizing them, I believe they're very encouraging. But are there other ways above and beyond that in which you're actively listening, trying to address some of these ideas, the concerns from the front line?
Yeah, absolutely, Gerardo. And this one's exciting for me because you're right. Our teams are running lean, the workloads are high, and so we need them to do the job that they're assigned to, be it engineer or remote engineer. And so if you're out, turning wrenches on an instrument, you're not necessarily on a project to drive innovation or improve a process. So we've got to make sure that the right people are hearing the right input in order to do that. One of the ways that I do that is I do a skip level meeting that I call the huddle with Harold. And so when I took this team over as an example, I took my entire org structure and broke it down into equal parts, and I invite those folks to a meeting, and I randomize the whole team, and I spent an hour with them. And you see this sometimes where a leader will say, "Hey, come join me for 60 minutes and ask me your questions." And you get the same voices or you get the same questions, and not everybody wants to participate. So I do take a little bit of a step farther, and I pull them to the table officially.
Mm-hmm.
But I spend an hour with them, and it's me and a coffee cup and a notebook, and I say, tell me what's going on. Ask me the questions that you can't ask in a town hall, or that you feel uncomfortable asking in a larger setting, and let's get into it." And so you have to be honest and authentic with the team. They understand very quickly if you're giving them corporate BS, right? But that allows us a chance to really explain the why behind these things. Hey, the reason we're asking you to follow this process is because of X, Y, and Z. And you can spend the 10 or 15 minutes in that answer, in that dialogue. And I think it has a really positive impact on the teams. The other piece that you have to do here, much like with the surveys, is once you've heard their input, once you've had that dialogue, there's going to be action items that come out of that. You need to look into why a process isn't working. Why is this tool not working? Whatever. You have to go try and solve that, and you have to communicate back to the team, "Hey, I heard you. This is what you said you needed. Here's what I've done to solve that gap." And it starts building trust that leadership is actually listening to them and actually willing to do something about it. I agree with the comments and the feedback that we get on the survey. If they're saying these things to us and then we do nothing with it, then our employees just become a number.
Mm-hmm.
And we can't have that. There are really brilliant people on our teams that have incredibly insightful um, uh, actions that we can take because they're the ones doing it. I'm not the one turning the wrenches. I'm not the one completing service orders. I'm not the one talking to a customer every day. I have to rely on my team to give me that expert analysis and that critique so that I can help them be more effective or more efficient for our customers.
Yeah, and two quick notes on that. First off, I'll tell you that it's working. For Agilent has been participating in the surveys for the last 3 years, and every year we see the participation growing by close to 50%. I would say rough rough numbers. So very good indicator that the teams feel that something is being done with the data, and just connecting the dots. I really like how all the different engagement options that you have, even what you learn from a surveys or from an earlier conversation with one of your team members might help to probe some of the concerns that others that are more on the shy end, more on the introvert, and don't like to proactively communicate this. Is, hey, I've heard some of this. Is this something that you also hear? What's your take on that?
Absolutely.
So,
And just one side comment there. When I first started these calls, the Huddle with Harold calls, I would give my opening spiel, and then I would say, okay, now it's your chance to ask questions, and no agenda, and no real lead in, and then you get about 4 to 5 seconds of empty air just staring at them through the camera before somebody breaks. But almost always the conversation starts rolling like a boulder down the hill, and
mm,
we run out of time because they become so engaged by the end of it. It's amazing to watch them open up that way.
yeah, no, that's great to hear, and I don't doubt it for a second. One last thing that I want to pick your brain on, because you were part of a very interesting keynote panel in Chicago, talking about what service as a whole can learn from the patient experience and translating that to the customer experience. So as we hear about the voice of the frontline, um, how what are the interrelationships between that voice of the frontline efforts that you're having and the voice and experience of the customers that you're delivering?
Yeah, absolutely. So for everybody out there, Agilent deals in a number of markets from pharma, biopharma, clinical diagnostic, government, academia, energy. We play pretty much everywhere. And yes, some of those, like cancer diagnostics, like clinical diagnostics, and pharma, are very highly regulated. And so it goes back to your comment earlier of, hey, you have to do this process because just that's the way we have to do it. Um, and sometimes that can lead to difficulties in getting the job done, or oh my God, why are we doing this? And I actually, as I was thinking about this question, I went back to the symposium, and it's about purpose, getting our team
Mm,
to understand their day-to-day purpose. And I talked about um, how, for part of our company that's directly affecting patients through cancer diagnostics, you can tie every test that our instrument runs to that patient that's ultimately getting to know whether they do or don't have cancer, or whether they're going to get this drug or that drug. And so that's a good purpose. But if we look across Agilent as a whole, we're trying to, as we say, deliver trusted answers and insights to change the quality of life. That's a huge mission and vision. And when we can do that by, checking our water supply or our food supply, or helping find rare earth minerals, or in many cases helping, the development, design, and manufacturing of drugs that ultimately can be life saving. That's a purpose. When you're talking to a customer and they're a little irate and giving you a hard time, understanding that when you can help them, you're helping them do the science that's making these things happen, can be
mhm.
incredibly powerful. And we miss that sometimes in our day-to-day life, right? We go, oh, it's just another angry customer. It's another system that doesn't work right. Oh, well, why doesn't this never happen? But when you can get everybody to focus on the real world results that are happening, the real world science in our case that's happening because you did a good job, because you documented things the right way, because you followed the right test procedures, because you spent that extra 10 minutes with a customer to make sure they were satisfied, that has a great impact on our teams, I think. And
Yeah.
it makes it personal, right? Even if they don't know the end patient in that example, or the end user of some of the drugs, to know that we make those things possible, I don't know. It makes me get up in the morning and come to work.
Yeah, at a time when there's abundance of data and communication, understanding and prioritizing what is it that we want to communicate and how do we do that effectively, so important. I
Right.
think the example that you shared,
And
it's
we're trying to do this across the company right now. It really has become a customer first mentality.
mhm,
What can we do to make sure that the customer is taken care of? And I would say, by extension, how do we make sure the customer's customer is taken care of? Because you can go into a big clinical lab, as an example, and you can get their instrument running, and you've made that clinical lab happy. But you have to remember, it's the patient on the other side of the clinical lab that's the real, beneficiary of the work that we've done.
great, great to wrap us up. Before I let you go, Harold, you've shared so much. Thank you for your service to our advisory board as well, and your continuous engagement in the different activities that we have. You're helping the community get better, including the what you've shared today. So I'd like to give you the opportunity, in the spirit of listening. We're about to start 2026. Is there something that you're excited about, that you're looking forward to, something personal that you'd like to share with the audience?
Yeah, absolutely. So my daughter in June graduated from the Savannah College of Art and Design with her BFA in film and television. So she is working on her first novel as a way to get into
Mm,
script writing and directing and wanting to get into that environment. So she's closing in on wrapping that up and being able to start shipping it out to agents. So I'm very excited for her and hoping that this leads to her name in lights before too long because as parents, when our kids are getting out there, especially in the environment we're in economically right now, it's time to get a
mhm.
job, and I look forward to you. So, for any members out there that happen to have a hotline into a job in the film and TV industry, I would love to hear from you.
Excellent. Yes, yes. So now, listening community, you have a task. We'll keep our fingers crossed. Congratulations on the graduation. Definitely exciting next steps. Harold, again, thank you so much. Today's podcast was recorded. It will be available in all of the usual platforms, including our LinkedIn and our on our website. And we look forward to seeing you in the next week. We went over for a couple of minutes, but we could have gone for an hour. And Harold, you've shared so much. So thank you. Have a great rest of the week. Have a great rest of the year, everybody, and see you soon.
Thanks, Robert.